How's it going, everyone? Back with another one of these forward videos. Um, Feeling good tonight. I'm looking good, I think. Finally down to my goal of 155 pounds, so that's exciting. I just wanted to make a quick video because I came across an article that I found very interesting. As a science kind of oriented person, and someone who's been making these videos based on, a recent breakup in a relationship I had. Uh, this kind of resonated with me, and it's from Time Magazine, which is a pretty reputable source. Um, so I kind of wanted to make a video just sort of collecting my thoughts on it. I haven't read through all of it, but the premise seems very interesting. It's called How to Break Up. The best way to break up, get over a breakup according to science. Um, so basically it says, like, you know, this is how devastating the breakup can be, um, and how a new study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, um, using basically a bunch of researchers used a bunch of cognitive strategies and found one which helped people best get over the breakup. So what happened was they used a few different strategies. The first one was the negative reprise of the ex. Right? Basically, mull over the unfavorable aspects of the lover, particularly an annoying habit. Highlighting the ex's negative traits. The blow is softened. Another prompt, it's called a love reprisal. It's saying it's okay to love someone without you're no longer with. They were told to accept their feelings, and they were just told that it's okay, it's normal. This is along the lines of like what I've been doing, but it's in a combination with this third strategy, which is distraction. It's to think about positive things unrelated to the ex, like favorite food. Just distracting yourself with reduced cravings and may help most of a person thoughts to come up with the breakup. And the control condition is, basically think how you would normally. And basically, they showed people photos of their ex. And these are all people that have been in relationships on an average of about 2.5 years. And they showed a photo of their ex and recorded their response using electrodes and EEG readings. So what the EEG readings found were as follows. So all three strategies significantly decreased people's emotional response to the photos relative to the responses in the control traits, which didn't use prompts. So basically, all three of these strategies work, but you choose to reflect on an ex's negative qualities, still reflect on them positively, and project hope and positive energy for them in the future, or distract yourself. All three of these things help people in the long run, help get over the feelings of needing the other person or needing them in your life, right? It's in all cases, it's kind of a way of letting go of the normalcy of having that person in proximity to you. So only the people who looked at their lover in a negative light had also decreased in feelings of love toward their ex. However, and here's the caveat, these people also reported being in worse mood than when they were started, suggesting that these negative thoughts, although helpful for moving on, may be distressing in the short term. So people with these traits technically put themselves in a more negative mood, which could really just, it projects like this kind of cyclical thing where it's like you're in a bad mood and like you might do something, distractive, or it's like you can kind of distract yourself from being in a bad mood. There's kind of like they're interchangeable ways of doing about it, but basically, you know, all thoughts of that person suddenly become associated with negative, and that's kind of weird because, especially if you're in a pretty extensive relationship where you've done X, Y, and Z with that person, and X, Y, and Z could then trigger negative emotional responses. So for me, that kind of it's kind of interesting how like it can help with moving on. Let's say, for example, like I see a TV show that my ex liked, right? Pop up on TV. Um, and if I use this approach, then I'm reminded of my ex, and because I associate it with my ex, and then negative feelings start to come about with that show, right? But like if you and your ex have been watching like a pretty popular show, like let's say like a Game of Thrones or a Breaking Bad or anything else that's ongoing, you know, uh, like it can whenever it's talked about, whenever it's discussed, it's like it affects you negatively, and that's really no use to yourself. It's like you have to kind of either not pay mind to it or kind of sulk in your own sadness while watching those shows. To me, it's very counterproductive to all those things. Um, so that's my take on it. It's okay to have negative associations with shows that your ex liked, because if you're thinking about this in a healthy way, you technically want to um, dissect what were both of your positive and negative traits and understand uh, what went wrong, what was right, and what was wrong about the relationship, and how to move forward from it. That's more along the lines of what I do. It's kind of like it's an objective thing, but the overwhelming theme is that I still have positive energy being sent uh, to my ex, because it's like there's no, like, what's the point of feeling negative about it? It's okay to rant here and there. That's normal, right? But it's more along the lines of like what's the point in associating everything negative, or kind of saying everything about it was toxic. That to me doesn't make sense. You don't learn that way, because then, like I said in another video, it kind of shifts all the blame towards your ex, and it kind of distracts you from helping yourself. Like the distraction method to me is very useful, but I'll continue on it, and then I sort of give my thoughts. So the distraction, on the other hand, made people feel better overall, but had no effect on how much they still loved their ex-partner. Distraction is a form of avoidance, which has been shown to reduce the recovery from a breakup, says the study co-author. Okay, so basically, what distraction does is it serves to kind of prolong the pain. If you don't go through all the motions of anger and sadness, and acceptance, then you're less likely to get over it sooner. Which is kind of what it's saying. It does, however, serve to, like I said before, get you out of that sense of perceived normalcy with that other person in your life. So there's definitely some pros and cons with it. But yeah, you don't purely want to distract yourself from feeling in the relationship or feeling about the breakup. You have to get those emotions out of you. So love appraisal showed no effect on either love or mood, but still dulled the emotional response to the photo. The authors classify love for another person as learned motivation similar to thirst or hunger that pushes a person toward their partner in thought and in behavior, that can turn elicit different emotions based on the situation. When love is reciprocated, one can feel joy, or in the case of the breakup, persistent love feelings are associated with sadness and difficulty recovering of independent sense of self. Classifying love as motivation is controversial in the field. Other experts believe that love is an emotion like anger or a script like riding a bike. However, endurance of love feelings, which lasts much longer than a typical bout of anger or joy, the complexity of these feelings, both positive and negative, and the intensity of the inflation of the motivation the offers right. To get over a breakup, heartbroken people change their way of thinking, which takes time. Just as it can be challenging to fight other motivations like food or drug cravings, love regulation doesn't work like an on-off switch. To make a lasting change, you'll probably need to regulate your love feelings regularly, because the effects likely wear off after a short time. Writing a list of many negative things about your ex as you can think of once a day until you feel better may be effective, she says, though this exercise tends to make people feel worse. She says this effect goes away. Her past research has told the negative appraisal also decrease infatuation and attachment to the ex, which will make you feel better in the long run, she says. Findings are particularly relevant to the age of social media, when photos of exes and resulting pages of love may come up frequently. All three strategies make it easier for the person to deal with encounters and reminders of the ex-partner in real life and social media. So, essentially, it kind of scripts. It doesn't say the best way. It kind of breaks it down and says, like, regulating your love emotions is, in a sense, the best way. What that means is sort of what I said, is a healthy dynamic of understanding everyone's positive, like dissecting the relationship, understanding the positive and negative traits, and not putting it into some box. You don't want to feel overwhelmingly positive, because then you're just not going to get over it. You're not going to want to feel overwhelmingly negative, because then you just have bad associations flying all about you and making you feel worse. If you don't want to feel distracted, because then you're not feeling anything, right? It's kind of finding the balance in between, which will eventually lead to acceptance. The sadness, the pain in between is okay to feel, right? You feel alone, you feel, you feel like you've lost a big part of yourself. You feel frustrated at points, angry as to why this happened, angry with yourself, sad at yourself, unmotivated, anything, and really. But in order to balance that out, you can then distract yourself. Let's say, if you find yourself in too much of a negative place, you can then go do something else to distract yourself. And then when positive emotions come up, you learn to accept them and regulate them by giving that person positive energy. And if you find yourself falling into unhealthy habits, then you go back into distraction. So really, regulation is the key there. So in that sense, I definitely agree. But as far as the negative emotions go, it's definitely okay to feel them as like every once in a while, right? Like there'll definitely be times where I'll rant about other people, about negative qualities about my ex, right? I'm sure she's done the same, right? It's completely normal, and we shouldn't be judgmental of each other about it. But the idea is that you don't want to go overboard with it, because then you're not learning, and then you kind of put this in a box and say that, oh, everything about this was toxic and this person is evil. And then you get into your mind that, like, oh, well, that person is evil, so I'm good, and the relationship, I haven't improved myself on the relationship, so I keep falling back into the same traps over and over again. It's like those people that say, like, oh, this relationship was toxic, right? Or this relationship was abusive, and then they find themselves getting back into those toxic or abusive relationships over and over again. It's really like, it's less about that and more about the fact that they kind of tend to use that negative energy to eventually shift blame onto others, and that's how they kind of accept things, which isn't conducive to self growth. Um, at the same time, expressing love emotions and giving off positive energy makes the process a lot slower, right? Uh, in my example, I wasn't ready quite yet to cut off things like my ex was in such a sudden fashion, and so I was frantic, and I was really hard on myself and depressed really because I kind of internalized everything as this is my fault, I ruined this, and at the same time I want to make things better because I didn't want things to end so quickly. Um, but after being out of that tunnel, it's a little along the lines of like, well, that's the best thing that could have happened. Um, yet, um, it's still okay to appreciate what you had, as long as you keep it at appreciation and not like obsession and love. Um, there is no love or obsession, I think, on any of our parts anymore. I think really it's a good time to just not have anything to do with each other, um, and you know move well past it. Uh, would I like us to eventually be friends? Yes, and I've said in previous videos I would like us to at least make amends, maybe be friends if that's a possibility. But like we don't want to step on each other's toes, right? Because especially with differing approaches, assuming they're different, um, then it just creates more disconnect and more discomfort when other situations like arise. Like for example, when we get involved in different partners. Uh, you know, I personally believe that we both possess the emotional intelligence to see past that, but that's going to take a lot of time. Uh, so I think that, um, like I said, regulating your emotions kind of best you can. It's kind of like if you think about it scientifically, it's like a damper effect, right? You got some system that's like oscillating back and forth. You're going from good to bad to good to bad. The goal is to ultimately like go from these good or bad like mood swings, like positive feelings toward the person, angry feelings toward the person, sadness at yourself, sadness or frustration of the other person. And it's like eventually it's oscillating, but you want to damper it so it becomes less and less and less and less. And you do that through distracting yourself from those feelings of either anger and resentment or sadness and um, missing the other person, right? So in my case, I've been applying like crazy to jobs. My main motivator is to make as much money as I can. Um, it's just something for myself, and um, just ideally be like in a position that I want to be in, because then I feel more fulfilled. Also, going to the gym. Um, I've been making significant strides, no pun intended, in the health department, and it feels a lot better already. Like to me, it's like my self-image is improving, and when that reflects on me, like other people see that, and it's kind of like a sense of like, well, this person doesn't get to have that anymore, uh, sort of deal, right? Uh, physical, getting yourself in better physical shape is a great way for not only distracting yourself but also kind of regulating your emotions. It's kind of like you sort of balance out the fact of like there's a negative of the other person, like the haha I got you there, but also a aspect of feeling positively toward yourself. It's not like as a put me down as much as it is, or put the other person down, as much as it is like a building yourself up and motivation. Um, that sort of kind of technique. Uh, so it's like it involves both positive thinking, like mostly about yourself, but like also just like a negative idea of like just say negative in the sense that it's comparing yourself to another person. Um, but like as much as I do that, and as much as it's a motivator for me, I still hope that she's doing well. I don't wish ill will upon a person that like I ultimately didn't wind up with. Right? Not everyone's going to be your cup of tea. Uh, not everyone is going to be perfectly understanding of you and your intentions, whether it be during the relationship, after the breakup, and nor should you expect them to. So, coming to peace with all that, as well as focusing on building myself up, has worked well for me. So that's like I said, it's kind of like intermingling all these kind of cognitive techniques that they describe in this article, and using them to sort of damper those emotions and feelings. Sometimes, you're not going to be like perfectly dampening them day by day. Sometimes it goes more like ooh, and then like some days are good, and then I don't know if that went off camera, but it's like it's not going to be like a perfectly damping oscillation. Sometimes it's like it's hard to regulate that. Sometimes it's really easy to regulate that. But yeah, so basically, I do these videos actually as a way of sort of kind of doing the same thing, right? It's a way of me saying like, okay, here's what I'm focusing on. Here's my philosophy, like, on everything. And I read articles to like critique myself to try to understand where the other person's coming from in the equation, but also as ways to verify what I've been doing. There's some good in it. I'm not saying, as opposed to putting all the criticism and blame on myself or the other person. So it's like talking out aloud to myself and practicing that sense of objectivity has been a big thing for me. There's also like sometimes I also like to rant about things. Like I always say, it's like I obviously like to state my hopes for the other person, because it has this kind of like connotation of expectation, but I shouldn't expect them to do anything, right? But it's like you kind of want them to feel a certain way. Uh, I certainly don't like the concept of her thinking that the relationship was toxic, because it was not. Maybe at some points it was more toxic than others, but it wasn't like an overall toxic relationship just because it didn't work out. Because I get the sense that she does. But like at the same time, it's like, well, if she thinks that, then that's out of her own insecurities then. Or she just, thought so poorly of both myself and herself that she decided that like, oh wow, I wasn't fucking ready and he wasn't fucking ready, right? Which is a total possibility. I'd be open to that, but it's like however we cope with it is okay. Would I have liked for us to come to like a sort of like an understanding and truce, potentially, as opposed to like her slamming the door at me on like an inopportune moment. Sure, but the pain I endured from that has made me stronger emotionally, like more understanding of myself emotionally, and and psychologically, as well as other people, and what I need to do and what I want to, look for, going forward. I think it's also helped me with my talking in front of the camera as well, at least by doing these videos. So I think I'm going to end that there, because right now I've essentially cleared my mind. I don't think there's really anything I want to rant about in front of the camera right now, like anything that I haven't stated already. Except for the fact that I'm really excited about these job opportunities that I'm looking at right now. I'm gonna call up an office of a place tomorrow. I got an interview on Tuesday. Things are looking up for you, boy. So that's probably why I'm in a good mood today. Like yesterday, I was very stressed out about the whole job search situation. I felt like I was putting myself in a box, right? I felt trapped, and I don't like feeling trapped. Like I felt trapped in the sense that like even before the breakup, like I felt trapped, and I felt like I couldn't, be on equal footing and help build our foundation toward the next step. And then I felt trapped on, after the breakup, not being able to, go into the city of my own volition and remedy things the best I could. And what I've sort of come to discover is like, yeah, I don't like the feeling of being trapped, which is why I've been so motivated to, look at more opportunities. And today, and actually, I think especially today, it's been like a breath of fresh air, because I've been looking at like other applications of like my coursework. Like for example, I was looking at a lot of drafting jobs, and now I looked at like MATLAB and coding and research opportunities, and I found some that like are actually seem a lot more lucrative and more fulfilling than those technical manufacturing and computer-aided design jobs that like I've been so desperately trying to grasp at. So looking at those more, and then sort of like mixing things up in the whole application process is gonna prevent me from driving myself insane. So yeah, but this marks about roughly 2 months out of graduation. So like as far as a concerted job search, I've gone 2 months and have gotten so far 3 interviews purely on online postings, with no networking. And this week I have started like real concerted efforts to network a lot more. I've had my dad put me in contact with a bunch of people, sent out my resume to a bunch of places in New York. It's like, I'm starting to be more involved, and he's seen that, and he wants to be more involved in that search process. So it's kind of like converging to the point where we're kind of now seeing more opportunities for me, and I'm seeing more opportunities for me, and I'm excited about it. So, what else is on my mind? I guess one thing I wanted to like sort of discuss. It's like completely unrelated to the article, but I guess in a sense it is. But like in the whole journey of self-learning and self-discovery, I found that it's really easy to get caught up in self-diagnosing. Like when you read about like personality disorders, and different diagnoses, and like signs of like toxic or abusive relationships, like especially emotionally abusive. It's easy to get caught up in like saying like there's a sense of self-bias, especially after a breakup, in which it's easy to either put that person in a box, or yourself in a box and then go through like a list of signs or red flags and say, well, here's an example of of something that happened to this, which means that I get to check it off this list. And if I check 8 things, then that means everything has gone to shit. To which I say, it's like, it's not. It's only bad when it was an overwhelming feeling at the time. It's like you can only really self-diagnose these things when you ultimately feel it's prominent in the relationship. It's kind of like trying to it's trying to like well, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. Like it's basically you're taking a test like after the fact of doing something, right? Kind of like, you know, you were in a freezing cold pool for like 30 minutes or something like that, right? And then you get out and like 30 days later are asked, oh, how cold was that pool, right? Like if you had to guess a temperature, you know, you're gonna get like a different, or you're gonna get like a much more diverse array of responses, I guess, right? Because people are gonna be like, oh, well, you know, your memory is this kind of distorted from time and the feeling of being warm again consistently, right? It's like there's ultimately going to be bias with time and different perspective on things. In some cases, you might get out of something and realize, well, actually, these behaviors were unhealthy, and we shouldn't have done that, and they were wrong about this, and I was wrong about this, and that's okay. But it's harder to label a relationship as, you know, entirely positive or entirely negative. Because obviously there were parts that were really good and there were parts that weren't, and there's a reason for that. So it's like, you know, as soon as you start labeling stuff, like that's kind of what I'm going back to. As soon as you start like positively or negatively labeling stuff and like not regulating that overwhelming emotion about those things and those associations, that's when you start going off the deep end and start making, you know, some crazy assumptions or ideas about, you know, yourself and the other person. So my battery is about to run out, so I'm going to end the video here. And to all of my like one viewer, I don't even know if I have a viewer, thanks for watching, I guess.